En Rusia, el gobernador de la región de Briansk asegura que lograron interceptar nuevos ataques con drones, una táctica de guerra cada vez más usada por Ucrania. Según el funcionario, la vigilancia ciudadana y las fuerzas de defensa permitieron derribar 3 vehículos aéreos no tripulados, utilizando armas antidrones. Vamos con nuestra corresponsal en Londres, Claudia Rebasa, para que nos amplíe esta información. Claudia, muy buenos días. Contanos más sobre esto, por favor.
Hola, muy buenos días, Iván y amigos de Café CNN. Este jueves hemos iniciado una mañana con más ataques de drones en la zona, en el territorio ruso. El ataque en Briansk que mencionaste, Briansk está en la frontera con Ucrania y con Belarus. Tres drones que fueron interceptados de acuerdo al gobernador local y que no han dejado daños ni heridos. Pero sumado también hubo otro ataque con un dron dirigido hacia la ciudad de Moscú este jueves por la mañana que el Ministerio de Defensa ruso alega que detuvieron. Esto se añade una vez más a un récord que hemos tenido este miércoles, en donde hemos visto ataques con drones en 6 regiones en Rusia. Un número una cifra récord desde que se inició la invasión de Rusia a Ucrania. Hay que recordar, Iván, que las autoridades ucranianas nunca se han responsabilizado por esos ataques, pero uno de los asesores del presidente Zelensky ha dicho, Mikhailo Podolyak, que la guerra se estaría moviendo al territorio ruso y estos ataques con drones lo demostrarían. Esa ha sido una de las declaraciones. Nuevamente, los funcionarios del gobierno de Ucrania nunca han tenido esa responsabilidad, pero ya vemos estos ataques con drones día a día, lo hemos venido reportando. Pero la cifra del día miércoles fue una cifra récord desde la invasión de Rusia a Ucrania. Iván.
Claudia, por otra parte, Estados Unidos asegura que Rusia y Corea del Norte avanzan activamente, han dicho textualmente, en las negociaciones sobre acuerdos de armas. ¿Qué otra información tenés sobre este asunto?
Iván, hay mucha preocupación por este acuerdo que se lograría y el gobierno de Biden ha expresado su preocupación. Sabemos por parte de información que han revelado la inteligencia estadounidense que, por un lado, el ministro de Defensa ruso estuvo en Corea del Norte aproximadamente hace un mes. A eso se ha sumado la presencia de más funcionarios rusos también en Corea del Norte. John Kirby, el día miércoles, el coordinador de comunicaciones para el Consejo de Seguridad Nacional, también aseguró que Vladimir Putin y Kim Jong-un han intercambiado cartas en donde se comprometerían a aumentar su cooperación bilateral. ¿Qué significa esto? Según la inteligencia estadounidense, ellos estarían en conversaciones muy avanzadas para que Corea del Norte proporcione municiones y diferente tipo de armas para Rusia para ser utilizadas en Ucrania. Y esto es de gran preocupación para el gobierno estadounidense. Hay que recordar que Corea del Norte ha negado públicamente estas acusaciones, pero definitivamente el gobierno estadounidense está siguiendo muy de cerca este tema. Por otro lado, Rusia tiene que apelar a sus aliados como Irán, Belarus y Corea del Norte para tratar de conseguir esas municiones, esas armas para poder confrontar este conflicto que ya tiene más de un año.
Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine are each claiming the other inflicted huge attacks within their territory. Overnight, Russian officials say 3 drones were shot down in the Bryansk region. Quite an explosion. And early Wednesday morning, Russia experienced the biggest drone assault on its territory since it launched its war on Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia hit Kyiv with a massive bombardment, the biggest officials say since the spring. CNN's Nada Bashir is following the story from London. Nada, I want to start with the drone attacks within Russia. What is the latest there?
Well, look, we've certainly seen an uptick over recent weeks of these drone attacks on Russian territory. As you mentioned there just this morning, yet another attempted drone attack, according to local authorities, targeting Moscow, the capital in Russia. And of course, as you mentioned there, another 3 drones reportedly shot down in the Russian region of Bryansk. Now, Russian authorities say their air defences have been successful in thwarting these attacks. But as you mentioned that this comes just a day after the largest drone assault we've seen on Russian territory since the beginning of the war. Now, of course, it is important to note that Ukrainian authorities typically do not acknowledge or admit responsibility for such attacks. In fact, we've heard from an advisor to the presidential office saying that Ukraine adheres to its strict orders not to use such weapons supplied by its partners against Russian territory. But we have seen a sharp increase in these drone attacks. This is becoming a key element in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Of course, we saw multiple regions targeted on Wednesday by these drone attacks, causing some infrastructural damage. We saw at least 4 military aircrafts sustaining damage as a result of these drone attacks. Several airports in Russia forced to temporarily close. So this is having an impact. And we've heard in the past from Ukrainian authorities, again, while not directly acknowledging responsibility for such drone attacks, they have said that they will continue to see an increase in the scale and the range of such attacks so long as Russian troops remain on Ukrainian land and in Ukrainian waters. And of course, we've heard from an advisor to the president who has said that the war is increasingly moving towards Russian territory. This is becoming a key factor within the war. And of course, as drones become used ever more by the Ukrainian authorities, we could potentially see further attacks against Russian territory.
Secretary General, welcome back to our program.
Thank you so much for having me, Christian.
So look, we are here in Kyiv. We're watching and listening to the authorities talking about gaining in the south, in the Zaporizhia region, Robotny, etc. And yet there's a discussion about whether this counteroffensive is going quick enough, is enough being achieved. Can I understand from your perspective as NATO Secretary General, how do you assess what's happening on the ground?
The Ukrainians are gradually gaining ground, meaning that they are pushing back the Russians. They are able to get through some of these heavily defended territories, not least the minefields, and therefore it is just even more important to support them because we all know that this is fierce fighting. It's a tough fight, and it's no easy way to victory for the Ukrainians, but they are making achievements, they are gaining ground.
So what are you hearing from your, member nations? Because there's a lot of talk that NATO, the US, allies want to see Ukraine conducting slightly different maneuvers. In other words, throwing everything and pushing all the way to the south. Are you hearing that kind of grumbling in capitals?
There's a constant dialogue going on between the NATO allies and, of course, also a dialogue with Ukraine. And NATO allies are delivering an unprecedented level of military support, also training, and allies are also advising. But at the end of the day, it has to be the Ukrainians, the commanders on the battlefield that are making those difficult and tough decisions. What we have seen is that Ukrainians have exceeded expectations again and again. We have to remember where the whole thing started last year with the full-fledged invasion by Russia into Ukraine. Then experts believe that Ukraine will only last for a few days or a few weeks. Now they have liberated the north around Kiev, the east around Kharkiv, and a lot of territory in the southern Kherson, and now they're making even more gains. So we need to trust them. We advise, we help, we support. But at the end of the day, this is the Ukrainians that has to make those decisions.
So, look, I've talked to soldiers, including those who are wounded and are being rehabilitated in various recovery centers. I've heard also from commanders. We can see the reports. And they say they're very grateful, obviously, for everything that they've got. But, for instance, General Zaluzhny, who's the wartime battlefield commander, has said no army would be able to push so rapidly and so intensely on the ground without first having air superiority or even air supremacy. And they do not have it. Do you believe that they, are they going to get it in time? We understand the F-16s from Norway, from Denmark, from the Netherlands may be coming, but not in time for this offensive, this counteroffensive.
NATO allies have delivered a lot of capabilities that also help them to control their airspace. Advanced air defense systems, which have proven extremely effective, not least because the Ukrainians are very skillful in operating these systems, but also drones and also long-range cruise missiles. Then I welcome the decision by several NATO allies, Denmark, the Netherlands and Norway, to deliver F-16s, and also the United States and others to make that possible and to start training. This will take some time, but it demonstrates the commitment of not least European allies to also go alongside the US in providing military support to Ukraine, and also support that will have an enduring and lasting impact on the battlefield, but it will take some months before the planes and the pilots can operate over the airspace in Ukraine.